Hi, welcome to the GDS podcast. I'm Ryan and I'm joined by Justin. Joining us today is Sam Shiah, former TMT Investment Banker at Deutsche Bank and Morgan Stanley, and now he runs Wall Street Mastermind to help students break into investment banking. Sam, you know your own background better than us, so could you walk us through your finance journey?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on. So I graduated in 2008 during the peak of the financial crisis. So it was a terrible time to graduate for someone who wanted to start their career in finance, I guess. But I did my junior summer internship at Bear Stearns in the summer of 2007. And most of you are probably not old enough to remember this, but summer of 2007 was when the two Bear Stearns hedge funds collapsed because of mortgage-backed securities. And that was like the first domino that triggered the entire financial crisis, right? So that was literally happening as I was at my internship. And back then I was just like a clueless college student. I had no idea how serious it actually was. And I had no uh, kind of like awareness of what was about to happen. And so at the end of the summer, when I didn't get a return offer because they didn't have return offers to give because like, they were like cutting a bunch of jobs and whatever. Um, I was like completely taken by surprise. And so I had to re-recruit for full time. And it was very, very tough because one, it was a tough job market given the market conditions. And two, not having a return offer also made it way harder for another firm to want to take a chance on you, right? It's almost like a scarlet letter. It's like, oh, what's wrong with you? Like, are you a bad intern, right? So I actually got rejected probably by like 20 plus different banks during full-time recruiting. And Deutsche Bank was one of the last two firms that I had interviews with. I remember I had a super day with Deutsche Bank and a super day with Jeffries, uh, both on the same day. And back then, Jeffries wasn't what it is today. It was like still like a pretty new bank, kind of an upstart. They're not like nearly as established as they are today. But I remember doing my super day. At Deutsche Bank all morning and then running down the street because Jeffries and Deutsche Bank in San Francisco were on the same street. They're on California Street. And running down the street a couple blocks to go to my Jeffries Super Day. And then I did that Super Day all afternoon. So I had like, I don't know, 10 hours of back to back to back to back to back interviews. It's like the most exhausting day of interviews that I've ever had. Funnily enough, those ended up being the only two offers that I got. I don't know what it is. Maybe I had gotten so many reps getting rejected by other firms that I finally got good enough at interviewing, or maybe it was like back against the walls, like, hey Sam, if you don't get one of these two, like there's no more interviews. And so I finally performed. But long story short, I ended up picking Deutsche Bank, right? So I started my career there, did my first year in banking at Deutsche Bank, and then I lateraled to Morgan Stanley's tech group down in Menlo Park for my second and third year. So I did that because at the time, I knew I wanted to recruit for private equity, which is what a lot of banking analysts want to do. And the exit opportunity at MS Tech is probably one of the best out of all the groups in the Bay Area at the time. It was probably like them and Goldman TMT were like the two best groups, right? And Catalyst was like a very, very new firm at the time. They had like just started. And so anyway, I lateraled for the exit opportunities. I did 2 more years there. And then after 2 years at Morgan Stanley, I went to private equity at a middle market fund called GI Partners. And there I focused on, so they do like P investments into like asset-backed industries. So anything that has like hard assets behind it that they can use as collateral for downside protection. So like they invest in real estate, but they also do like healthcare and tech and but like healthcare would be like nursing homes and things like that, right? Tech would be like data center businesses and they even own like a winery, and so it's all like hard assets. So it's not like software or things like that. So I focused on tech because obviously I came from tech. So it was mostly investing in like data center companies. Um, and so I did that for 2 years. And then after that, most private equity firms either will ask you to go back to business school if you want to continue to be promoted. And it's not guaranteed you'll be promoted. It's just like if you want to even be considered, you have to go back to business school first and then come back and reapply. At the time, I actually decided that I didn't want to go back to business school because I did business undergrad already at Haas at Berkeley. And I was like, I don't feel like going back to school for 2 more years just to learn the exact same things. And it's also expensive, right? And then two, uh, I actually didn't see myself doing PE forever, based on like what I had already experienced. Some people love it. I didn't really love it, I guess. But the thing that I did like is so in PE, there's like two parts to your job. There's the investing aspect, which is what most people think about. It's like picking the right companies to invest into, and like which companies do you want to do like an LBO with. And then the second part is more on the portfolio management side, which is like more operational, like the portfolio companies you already invested in, working with them to improve their operations, to improve their growth rate, improve their margins, basically EBITDA expansion so that you can exit for a higher price. Right. So I actually spent a good amount of time working with GI Partners' largest portfolio company at the time because it was like their largest investment in their second fund and their largest investment in their third fund merged together. And so that like a lot of the returns for the fund was riding on that investment doing well. So there were like a lot of senior partners on that deal, and also like they cared a lot about just like that business doing well, right? So through that experience, I was like, I actually enjoy more than investing. I actually enjoy kind of like rolling up my sleeves and working with the CEO and the CFO of the business to improve the business. So being in Silicon Valley at the time in the Bay Area, I was like, I think I want to go and be an operator. And there's a ton of really interesting tech companies in the Bay Area, obviously. So I decided to kind of like pivot into working in tech. So I ended up going to Square at the time. They're now called Block, right? It's a company started by Jack Dorsey. It's the payment dongle that you guys see everywhere, and the payment terminal that a lot of brick and mortar businesses use now. When I joined Square, I was joining their strategic finance team. It was a really, really awesome team. They only hired people that came from banking and came from PE. And so it was one of the most high caliber teams I would say that I've ever been a part of. And then after that, I left Square to go work for GitHub. And I was one of the first hires by the CFO there to help him build out the finance and strategy team at GitHub. And that was I joined GitHub right before their Series B, and they eventually got acquired by, well, Square went public, and then GitHub got acquired by Microsoft for $7.5 billion. And so both of those ended up being really, really good exits. I joined one more startup after that called Enjoy Technologies. That was started by Ron Johnson, who is the guy that started the Apple retail store concept. So the Apple retail store is the most successful retail business of all time. Like they measure retail businesses by revenue per square foot, right? And the Apple stores that we all know is the highest revenue per square foot business in terms of all retail businesses, right? So Ron Johnson started that concept. So he's like kind of legendary in the space. He started a company called Enjoy Technologies, which unfortunately did not work out. So um, anyway, during my time at Enjoy was also when I kind of started thinking about starting Wall Street Mastermind. So kind of like halfway through my time at Enjoy, I started working on Wall Street Mastermind on the side. And here we are 8 years later. I'm still doing Wall Street Mastermind. So that's kind of my story. I know that was kind of long, but yeah, happy to answer more questions about any of those things. So
Going through 20 rejections for like full-time IB recruiting seems very tough. What pushed you to like keep on going with investment banking?
yeah, it was very tough. It just, whatever ego you had going into the process and whatever amount of confidence you had, um, you just get beaten down over and over again, right? Like every single rejection that comes in is just like it's very deflating. You're working so hard, but you just like sometimes you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I've been there. And I think in a way it kind of helps me now as I'm coaching a lot of students through the process is like when some students are struggling and they're feeling down or whatever, like I can empathize with how they're feeling because I was in that position many, many years ago. But to answer your question, the thing that really kept me going is one, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. Come from an immigrant family. Like my parents moved us to America when I was 9. They made a ton of sacrifices for us to be able to grow up here in the States and have the opportunities that we have. When I say we, it's like my sister and I. And for them, the big thing was like education, right? They wanted
Mm.
us to be able to go to schools. And all of that was supposed to lead to like you getting a great job after you graduate and whatever, right? So part of it is like I didn't want to um kind of like waste all the sacrifices and efforts that they made. So I was like, I felt like I had to succeed. I know a lot of kids that also come from immigrant families can relate to that, right? The other part of it was, I think on a more personal level, because my parents had to make so many sacrifices for us to just even be here in the States. Um, so like what happened was like, when I was like in junior high and high school, they wanted to have us live in Cupertino because Cupertino, which is where Apple's headquartered, um, they have really good public schools. And so they wanted us to go to a good public school so that we can go to good colleges. But also, like, if you want to live in Cupertino, it's very expensive, right? Like, we couldn't even afford to buy our own place. Like, we just rented the entire time. And at one point, my dad lost his job because he was like, he was basically in enterprise sales, but also like English is a second language, right? So it's like being in enterprise sales but not being fluent in English and also being from a different culture, I think it's very tough. But during the dot com bust, because I graduated high school in 2004. So in the early 2000s, when the economy crashed, he lost his job and he was like unemployed and couldn't get a job for like multiple years. And so there was a period of time where he was like trying to keep us in Cupertino, but he also had no income. And it was just like depleted all of our savings basically. And then at one point in high school, we had to move back to Taiwan for a year and a half because we ran out of money. And you could get a job in Taiwan, you couldn't get a job here. Long story short, though, my point is my parents, despite their best intentions of like just wanting us to be able to live in an area that quite frankly we had no business living in, they were like always stressed out financially. And because they were always stressed out, they argued a lot. And because they were always arguing, my sister and I were just like you just want to kind of run away from that, right? So we were like, didn't enjoy being at home. We weren't super close to our parents, even though they cared so much and they were trying so hard to give us what they wanted to give us. And so growing up in that environment, I just remember like, I think we're all motivated by either like something we're running towards, like something we're trying to achieve, or something we're trying to run away from. And we're all like really shaped by like our childhood experiences growing up. So in this case, I was trying to run away from like I just kept thinking like, dude, when I'm an adult and I am a dad and a husband and I have my own family and I have my own kids, I don't want to be the same as my parents. I don't want to have to like always be stressed out about money, always fight with my wife, always be in a bad mood. I don't want my kids to like not want to be around me because of that, despite my best intentions. I was like, I just don't want that. So I was like, I got to make as much money as possible so that all these problems will go away. That was what I like thought, right? And so I was very motivated to like make a lot of money. And I was like, when I got to college, the reason why I was attracted to banking, candidly, I was like, oh, I learned about banking. I was like, oh, this is one of the highest paying jobs you can get right out of college. So I'm gonna go for banking without even knowing like what banking is and whatever. Obviously, I learned all that afterwards. But when I was going through it, it's just like, why did I not give up? To come back to your original question, it's like your motivations have to be strong enough. That's always tell us like if you're not that serious about banking, you probably shouldn't even start trying in the first place because the process is so competitive, it's so tough that if your motivation is not strong enough, you probably will give up at some point along the way, and you're just wasting your time. Right. So anyway, those are like my personal reasons for why I kept going because I was like, I have to get this job no matter what. Because like I was trying to, one, not let my parents' efforts go to waste, but two, I was like trying to run away from this thing. And I was also trying to like run towards the thing that I felt like was going to give me financial security. Right. And like now, many years later, like I've achieved that. And I'm glad to say that, in a sense, I achieved what I set out to achieve because I rarely ever argue with my wife about money, and I don't have to worry about like, oh, like we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't spend money on this or whatever. It's like by graduating into banking, I've honestly never had to worry about money. I've always made more money than I needed at every single stage of my career, right? And that's the beautiful thing about starting your career in high finance. So.
Coming from Cali, I can definitely sympathize like with the home prices in Cupertino being super expensive. I'm just curious, since like this is an emerging space, and like this is a very common career path, but would you ever start a search fund?
I actually have thought about it. Um, Obviously not anytime soon because I'm like, fully focused on running Wall Street Mastermind right now. But it is a space that I think is very interesting. And I also think that for people that don't want to start a business from scratch, and they want to just because starting a business from scratch, I can speak from experience from starting Wall Street Mastermind, like it's very hard. It's like one of the hardest things you could possibly do, right? And a lot of businesses that start like they don't succeed or they don't last very long, right? I know there's some statistic out there. You guys probably look up the exact numbers, but I want to say like over 90% of the businesses that start don't last past like 5 years, right? So like for Wall Street Mastermind to be around for 8 years is like it's already like pretty rare. And so I do think that, for people that are interested in entrepreneurship or want to run a business, but they don't want to take the risk of starting one from scratch, I do think like the search fund model is a good way to do that. I think also there's a lot of um, macro tailwinds right now, right? Like all the baby boomers that are at retirement age who started businesses, a lot of them don't have like succession plans. Like either their kids aren't interested in taking over their business, or like they also don't even know that they can sell their business or they don't know how to sell their business. And so a lot of them are actually just gonna like let their business die off basically. Right. And so it's like that's why so many people, but also like, look, that's not a secret anymore, right? So like, there's a lot of MBAs nowadays, and just people in general who are going into the search fund industry because of this, because they know that there's probably a lot of businesses to be had for cheap, right? And if you could buy a business for cheap, then you could negotiate favorable payment terms like seller financing or whatever. Like a lot of them are using really creative strategies to not have to put up a lot of money up front. Like you can use SBA loans, you can, pay the seller back over time or whatever. And if the seller was going to wind this down business anyway, they weren't going to get anything for it. Even if you tell them like, hey, I'll cut you a check every month for the next 10 years or next 20 years, they're like, sure, why not? Right. So yeah, I think it is an attractive industry. It is getting more crowded. I don't know at what point it becomes I don't know at what point it gets to a point where it's like, oh, this is too saturated because that point, it probably will hit that point at some point, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to see more and more like these online gurus come out and teach people how to acquire businesses and whatever. And like, usually that's kind of like the first sign that something is like starting to become, a little bit overplayed. So I'm certainly not saying we're there already, but yeah, it is something I thought about, especially like coming from a banking background, coming from a PE background. I understand like the acquisition process and like what to look for in a business. And then I also have experience running a business already, namely Wall Street Mastermind. And so I have the operating experience. So I think I actually have like kind of a unique skill set because a lot of people, they either have one or the other, right? Like they have the finance background. Maybe they were a banker before business school, but they've never actually run a business before. Or vice versa. Like maybe they've run a business, but they don't know that much about finance. They don't know much about like valuation, how to structure deals. And so, yeah, it is something I thought about. But anyway, I don't know. Like not anything I would do in the near term. But maybe if one day I decide to stop doing Wall Street Mastermind for whatever reason, I could potentially see myself wanting to go and acquire another business. Like I don't ever see myself I don't want to say ever. Never say never, right? For the right opportunity, maybe, but I think it's very unlikely that I would go back to like being an employee for like just some other business. So probably going to be an entrepreneur, doing entrepreneurial things for the rest of my career is probably like the most likely scenario. So
Sounds good. Yeah. Justin, if you want to hop on ahead.
Yeah, sure thing. You were talking a lot about running businesses, and obviously now with, AI becoming more and more like available, obviously running businesses using AI is going to be a lot easier. But, how do you think AI is going to affect the investment banking recruiting and just the job in general?
yeah, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, right? I'll caveat it by saying that. But I think if I had to guess, um, I think it will make it harder,
Yeah.
right? Because it's already starting to happen, not just in banking, but in all industries, right? You see all the news headlines about um, a lot of entry level jobs being replaced by AI, right? The fact of the matter is, like, a lot of the entry level tasks that you have to do now, especially if it's like really repetitive or it's like, not that complicated, like sometimes an AI could do it better than a new college guy who has no experience, right? And AIs are easier to manage. They don't need to sleep. They're cheap. You don't have to pay them a high
Yeah.
salary, right? So like, of course, business across all industries, not just finance, but also tech, and also like even, I would say all industries at some point, they're all looking into, um, how they can create cost savings by implementing AI, right? So I don't think that's going to stop. And I don't think we've hit that inflection point yet, like I don't think that the number of junior bankers or the number of analyst opportunities have like significantly
Yeah.
decreased yet. If I look at like some banks, they publicly disclose like how many applicants they had each cycle and how many interns they actually took. So like Goldman Sachs is one of those firms. Like their intern class size has been pretty consistently right around 2,600 people every single year for the last few years. And so that hasn't like dropped yet. But like I do think that at some point in the next couple of years, as AI continues to improve, that number will kind of start to go down, right? I don't think it'll ever go to zero because you still need some junior people because I do think at some point, like one, like you need the junior person who's gonna kind of like run the AI and also like work with the AI. Um, and also like the other thing that's probably even more important than that is you still need junior talent that you can eventually groom and promote into the senior positions. At the senior level, like if you become a managing director, um, that's more of a sales job. Now, you're not going to send an AI into like the boardroom to talk to, your client's CEO or CFO and tell them why they should, do a deal with you or whatever. You still got to send a human, right? And so I think in the future, it's going to be more about like, okay, we don't need so many analysts, but we're going to hire a smaller group. And of those people, we're going to try to like find the really high potential ones that we can kind of promote up the ladder and become a senior banker. So I think there will always still be some amount of
Yeah.
jobs at the junior level, but like how many, that I don't know. It will become harder, just like guess what? Like all these really desirable industries and jobs, or even schools, like Ivy League schools, same thing. It just becomes harder and harder every year, right? Like if you look at the acceptance rate for all these things, it just continues to go down year over year, every year, right? So like I don't envy. Like I always tell people, I always tell all of our students is like, in a way, like yeah, I broke into banking back in 2008. The version of me back then, if I had to recruit today and compete against some of you, I don't think I would make it because it's like way harder today than it was back when I was in banking. And just like the level of competition and the amount of knowledge that students have today versus the students that I was competing with back then, it's like it's way more, right? Because you guys also have way more information and way more resources. And even like coaching services like Wall Street Mastermind, like that did not exist back in my days. So it's like it's just a whole different ball game. Everything gets more competitive over time. People are always looking for an edge. And so the way you have to prepare and the way you have to compete also has to evolve, right? And I'm sure in the future it will continue to evolve, So yeah, so I think it'll get harder, but I don't know. AI, I think will fundamentally reshape our society and also reshape kind of what we think about jobs in general, right? And I think there will also be new jobs and new positions that we can't even imagine that get created. Just like, before the internet and after the internet, there's a bunch of jobs now that probably have existed when we didn't have the internet, right? So I think it's kind of like that. But I do think like in the middle, there's like a transition period where there will probably be like a lot of job loss when the new jobs haven't been created yet, and that's probably gonna suck. And so, I think there's a little bit of luck there. It's like you don't control when you graduate, right? And so if you happen to graduate at the wrong time, but it's like I graduated in 2008, that was also bad luck, right? So you can't control what you can't control. My advice to everyone is just like control the things that are in your control. What you can control is like how you're preparing yourself to be the best candidate possible, right? What are you doing to be as competitive as you can be on paper? You can control like what's on your resume. You can control your GPA. You can control how you network with people and how you build relationships. You can control how you prep for interviews. Like those are all things you can control. And going back to the point about how like there will always still be some number of jobs, the way I think about it is like if you are the cream of the crop, you don't care what happens with AI, right? Like it's the people that are like kind of fringe candidates right now. Like if the bar is here right now and you're like this good, then when AI takes away some of the jobs and the bar gets raised, then you're not going to make it, right? But like if you're like the best and you're up here and the bar gets raised from here to here, you're still going to make it, right? So you just got to control the things you can control in terms of like how do I go from being this good to being actually like this good, right? So that's all you can do,
Yeah.
right? And then the rest of it is just like whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot about, being above the bar and being the top candidate. For you, you've coached like thousands of people. What sort of trends have you noticed in those top candidates, that differ to, the other, like, let's say like the middle candidates?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I think um, I kind of think of it as there's a lot of parallels to being a professional athlete,
Yeah.
right? Like I use this analogy all the time, which is like if you're trying to make it into banking or private equity or high finance in general, you know, it's very similar. You're trying to make it to like the pinnacle of the finance industry. It's like the big leagues. It's like if you're a basketball player, you're trying to make it to the NBA. If you're a football player, you're trying to make it to the NFL. If you're a finance person, you're trying to make it to Wall Street, right? There's only a very small percentage of people that can make it to that level. Now, some of that is like how early did you start working at it, right? Like a lot of people that end up making it to the NBA, for example, they started playing basketball when they were like super young. And then they've been playing like organized basketball the whole time, right? Versus if like someone only started playing basketball senior year of high school, like the chances of you making it in is significantly lower, right? It's the same thing with recruiting. Like if you start preparing freshman year, nowadays we're even starting to see people come and like approach Wall Street Mastermind as like seniors in high school because recruiting keeps happening earlier and earlier, right? But we've also seen from our internal data the our students who start working with us freshman year, on average, not saying like this is 100% of the time, but like on average, they get better outcomes than the people who don't start working with us until sophomore year. The people who start sophomore year don't, on average, they'll get better outcomes than people who don't start until junior year. And in junior years, people will, on average, get better outcomes than people who start senior. And there's no magic sauce to that. It's just like the people who start earlier have more time to prep. They have more internships on their resume. They've networked with more people, so they have more referrals. And they've been prepping for their interviews longer, so they interview better, right? And so that's like one. It's like if you want to win a race and you start running the race earlier, you get a head start, you have an advantage, right? So that's why I always encourage people to start as early as possible. Two, obviously, talent still matters, right? Like if you're talking about being an athlete, like I don't know, like if I try to make it to the NBA versus like if LeBron James try to make it to the NBA, like athletically, genetically, like he just runs faster, jumps higher, and whatever, whatever. Like it's just gonna be hard for me to compete, right? So there is some of that, but I would say that's probably like the that's probably actually like the smallest factor because I think like banking is not you're not trying to become like a rocket scientist or something. You're not trying to like do quantum physics or whatever. You don't need to be a genius. You need like a reasonable level of intellect, which most people have. And then I would say like the more important thing is actually like your work ethic. Work ethic is super important because banking recruiting is like one of the hardest things you're ever gonna have to do. And also uh, they just overload you with requirements, right? It's like, yeah, you're a full-time student. You got to get good grades, which is like already kind of like a full-time job in and of itself. But then on top of that, most people are just worried about getting good grades in college. But on top of that, you got to do all these internships on the side during the school year, part-time, whatever, 10, 20 hours a week, right? Then you can't just do one. Ideally, you do two or three, or some people do four, whatever, right? So you're doing that on top of your academics. Then on top of that, you got to network with hundreds of bankers, right? You got to send all these networking emails. You got to have jump on networking calls. Every call takes 30 minutes, right? And you got to prep for interviews, and then you got to like join clubs on campus, and you got to become like, take on leadership positions. Like All these things are pulling you in all these different directions, and you're just super busy. And if you don't have the work ethic and you're not like super committed to this process, you're probably just not gonna do all these things. Because I haven't even mentioned like being a college student. I haven't mentioned like having fun, having a social life, going out with friends, having a girlfriend, like whatever, right? Like this is like before all of that, right? And so there's like a lot of sacrifices required. Just like if you wanted to become a professional athlete, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. You're like in the gym all the time when your friends are like outside playing or whatever. It's similar, right? So work ethic, I think is super important. And then I think the last thing I will say is just like being able to um you have to have a certain level of like resilience and being able to persevere because there will be setbacks along the way, almost always. And a lot of students, especially the ones that are applying for banking, they're not used to that. They're not used to like tasting failure. They've been like, you know, really successful their entire life up to this point. They're valedictorian in high school, and they went to the Ivy League school. They always gotten straight A's, right? They were class president. They're like they've always gotten everything they wanted, and then this is the first time when it's like, wait, what? Like I'm applying to all these places, and you know, I'm getting rejected. Like why? I don't understand, right? And so, going back to what I said before, and the question you guys asked me earlier, is like, what
Yeah.
kept you going after 20 plus rejections? I will tell you right now, it's not because I'm smarter than some of the people that didn't get into banking, no way. It's not like in many ways, I think I just outlasted them because a lot of people, after the fifth rejection or the seventh rejection or the 10th rejection, it's like they throw in the towel because like once you get rejected enough times, you're just like every rejection kills a little bit more confidence. And at some point, your self-doubt creeps in and you're like, maybe I'm not good enough. Okay, maybe it's not meant to be. Okay, I'm just gonna go for something easier, whatever. You rationalize the decision yourself. It's like, I didn't want to do banking that much anyway, right? And then so you don't make it, right? So I think like being able to outlast the other people, I think is really, really important as well. So I would say like those are probably some of the, I mean, I could go on, I could name 10 different qualities if I wanted to, but I would say those are like some of the most important ones, right?
Sounds good. I mean, unfortunately, I do believe that like we are out of time, but yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you so
no,
much, Sam, for joining us
yeah,
today.
absolutely. It was a pleasure. It was fun. If you guys ever want to do a part two someday, I'm happy
Yeah.
to do it. But yeah, best of luck with your podcast. I think it's an exciting initiative that you guys are starting, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you guys take this thing. So, thanks for having me on.